All right, so get this. Our deep dive today is on Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay.
But, and here's the twist, our source material is like a podcast outline about him.
Interesting. Like we're getting a behind the scenes look at another show almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And what's wild is how much this simple outline actually reveals. I mean, it's like a roadmap to not just who Gandhi was, but how he, became such a monumental figure.
I agree. A roadmap is a great way to put it. It lays out the key moments and influences that shaped his life and his philosophy.
Right. So the outline starts like with his early life, born Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi in 1869. Gosh, that's a world most of us can barely imagine. India under British rule, societal norms so different from our own.
It is fascinating to consider the context, right? Like how much his upbringing in that specific time and place shaped the man he became.
Totally, yeah. And what's interesting is that in his early 20s, Gandhi goes to London to study law. Can you imagine? For a young man from his background, that must have been a huge cultural shift.
Oh, absolutely. It's like stepping into a whole new world, exposed to Western thought and political ideologies at such a crucial point in his development.
Yeah, like, did that experience plant the seeds for his later activism, you think?
It's definitely a possibility, and it sets the stage for what comes next. The outline emphasizes his time in South Africa, and this is where Gandhi encounters, head-on racism.
Wow.
This is where we see the birth of satyagraha, his philosophy of nonviolent resistance.
Okay, so the satyagraha, could you break that down a bit? What does that actually mean?
Right, so it's not just about, like, don't fight back. It's way deeper than that. It's deeply rooted in Hindu philosophy.
Oh, I see.
And it really emphasizes this power of truth and love to overcome injustice.
So how did those experiences, those racist experiences in South Africa, how did they shape this philosophy?
Well, you have to imagine, right? He was confronted with blatant discrimination. And this really, like, forced him to grapple with how to fight oppression, but without, becoming the oppressor yourself.
Right.
So satyagraha, it was his answer. A way to resist injustice without resorting to the same violence and hatred.
It makes you wonder, would Satyagraha even have emerged in the same way if he hadn't had those experiences? Like, it feels like South Africa, almost a crucible for his ideas.
I think that's a very insightful observation, yeah. It's definitely a turning point, and having really honed his philosophy in that crucible of South African racism, he returns to India, and he's ready to apply satyagraha on a much grander scale.
Okay, so now he's back in India, it's 1915, and he's not just a lawyer anymore, right? He's a symbol.
Exactly, yeah. He's the symbol of hope for a nation that's, really yearning for independence.
And this is where things get, well, really exciting. This outline points to the non-cooperation movement, the Salt March, the Quit India movement, all these massive movements that ultimately lead to India's independence.
Right. These weren't just abstract ideas. These were movements that demanded action, that called on people to, well, resist in very concrete ways.
So, like, what did they actually involve? For example, non-cooperation. What did that look like in practice?
Well, non-cooperation was about strategically disrupting the colonial system. So Gandhi urged Indians to boycott British goods, to boycott British institutions, and even to refuse British titles.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. To reject everything associated with the ruling power.
It was, and it was a way to exert pressure without, resorting to violence. It really put the onus on the British to respond.
So clever. It's like they had to acknowledge the resistance whether they wanted to or not. And the Salt March, that's just incredible. The fact that he walked 240 miles to protest salt, it's just mind-blowing.
The Salt March is a perfect example of Gandhi's understanding of symbolism. You see, under British rule, salt was this heavily taxed commodity, which made it unaffordable for a lot of Indians. And Gandhi chose salt because it was this basic necessity, something that affected, the lives of every single Indian.
It's so brilliant. It wasn't just some abstract political concept. It was about something as fundamental as, like, food, putting food on the table.
Yeah, and it was a way to connect with people on this really visceral level.
Yeah.
And it forced the British to respond in a way that, well, that really exposed their brutality to the world.
Right, because it wasn't just symbolic. It sparked all this civil disobedience. Thousands of Indians joined Gandhi in making salt illegally, and then the British responded with these, like, brutal crackdowns.
Which only further fueled the movement, right?
Right, exactly. And it wasn't just in India. It actually captured global attention.
Wow.
It put a spotlight on the injustices of British rule and really garnered a lot of sympathy for India's independence.
Okay, so the Salt March, the non-cooperation movement, these were obviously crucial in India's path to independence. But I'm noticing that Gandhi's vision, it goes way beyond just political freedom, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's this whole section in the outline about his desire for internal societal change. And it highlights his passions, right, for tackling things like the caste system, poverty, and the plight of the untouchables. And I do agree. I think this part of his life often gets overshadowed by the grand narrative of independence.
Yeah, it's almost like people prefer that simpler story, Gandhi freed India. But he was fighting for something much deeper, a truly just and equitable society for all Indians.
And that fight, it continues to this day, both in India and globally.
Right. And understanding that holistic vision of his, it's crucial if we really want to address those systemic inequalities that, let's be honest, persist even in our own societies today.
I couldn't agree more. His work is far from finished.
So we've got Gandhi the lawyer, Gandhi the activist, the social reformer. But then the outline takes kind of a darker turn. It mentions internal conflicts. What does that even mean?
Well, this is where, things get really complicated. Despite his lifelong commitment to unity, right? India's partition in 1947, which divided the country into India and Pakistan, was incredibly violent. And this raises some really tough questions about Gandhi's legacy.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you have this iconic figure who preached nonviolence. On the other hand, you have this reality of a nation erupting into violence. So, how do we reconcile those two things?
It's important to keep in mind the historical context, right? Gandhi was dealing with centuries of, well, deeply entrenched social and religious tensions. He advocated tirelessly for unity and peace. He even went on a fast to try and quell the violence.
Wow.
But the partition, as tragic as it was a stark reminder of just how deep those divisions ran. Problems that, to be honest, continue to plague the region even today.
It really puts his commitment to nonviolence in a whole new light, doesn't it? I mean, to face that level of division and still hold on to those principles, that's incredible.
It speaks volumes about his conviction, his unwavering belief in the power of love and understanding. And, even though the partition was this incredibly tragic event, it didn't diminish his impact in the long run.
That's interesting. You'd think it would have undermined his entire philosophy, but it seems like it didn't.
Right. In fact, the next part of the outline focuses on his legacy after his assassination in 1948. And it asks a very pointed question, did his death, in a way, make him even more powerful as a martyr?
Ah, so that's the irony, right? The violence he fought against ultimately took his life, but in doing so, it kind of solidified his image as a symbol of peace.
Yeah, exactly. It's this tragic paradox. His death, it amplified his message.
So his message lives on, but does it? I mean, this outline points out how Gandhi's words, like that famous quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," are everywhere today, right? But do we really get what he meant?
That's the question, isn't it? It's so easy to just toss around these inspirational quotes, without really grappling with the substance behind them.
Right.
Right.
For Gandhi, nonviolence, it wasn't just a tactic, it was truly a way of life.
A way of life, yeah. So what did that actually look like?
Well, it was about recognizing this inherent dignity in every human being, even those we disagree with, even our opponents.
Wow.
It was about resisting injustice without mirroring that hatred and violence. And that, that takes incredible discipline, incredible moral strength.
And that's the thing, right? It's not just about these big historical movements. The outline specifically mentions that Gandhi's lessons, they apply to our everyday lives.
Absolutely. Think about how often, we react with anger or aggression when we feel wronged. Gandhi's philosophy challenges us to find a different path, a more compassionate and ultimately a more effective way to deal with conflict.
Okay, so it's not about waiting for some, grand opportunity to be a hero. It's about these everyday choices, those small moments where we choose compassion over anger, understanding over judgment. Gandhi was also very open about his own flaws and his struggles. Yes, absolutely, and that makes him even more relatable, right? He wasn't this perfect, untouchable figure. He was a human being who was committed to this way of living and worked towards it constantly, acknowledging his own imperfections along the way.
It's inspiring, but also, I don't know, a little daunting.
How so?
Well, you think, okay, if Gandhi could do it, I should be able to too. But to actually change my ingrained habits, my reactions, that's really tough.
It is. It's a lifelong process, but even small steps, they can make a difference. And Gandhi really believed in the power of individual action. Even those seemingly small acts of kindness or courage, they can ripple outwards and create change.
Okay, this outline, it's taken us on quite a journey. I
Hmm.
mean, from Gandhi's early life and the development of satyagraha to, his leadership in India's independence. And then even his more personal beliefs, his commitment to simplicity, his flaws. Wow, this is a lot to unpack.
It really is, and it's just the beginning.
So the outline ends on this interesting little detail. It talks about Gandhi promoting the charkha.
The charkha, you mean the spinning wheel.
Yeah, that's the one.
It might seem like an odd detail to focus on, but Gandhi saw it as this really powerful symbol. He was a big advocate for the charkha.
Okay, I'm curious, why a spinning wheel? What was so significant about it?
Well, Gandhi promoted the charkha as this symbol of self-reliance and, local economic empowerment.
Hmm.
He saw it as this way for Indians to break free from dependence on British textiles and to revitalize their own local economies.
That's really interesting. And it ties into like so many relevant issues today, right? The over-reliance on these like global supply chains, the exploitation of cheap labor, the environmental cost of mass production. Gandhi was, gosh, he was so ahead of his time on this.
He really was. He understood the importance of local production and sustainable practices way before, they became these buzzwords that they are today.
So imagine, like, what would Gandhi think of our world today?
Right.
This globalized, technology-driven world, the speed of information, the power of corporations. Would he see it as like a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a fantastic question and one that I don't think has an easy answer, but it's a question worth pondering for sure. The Charkha, I think, offers this really interesting lens to examine our relationship with technology, globalization, and even our own choices as consumers.
It's a lot to think about.
I mean,
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
yeah.
I mean, from Gandhi's early life and the whole development of satyagraha to his leadership in the movement, and then even his personal beliefs, his vision for a different kind of society. It feels like, honestly, like we've only scratched the surface.
Right. We have, and that's, I think, what makes exploring history so fascinating. There's always more to uncover, more to learn. Even a simple outline, can spark so many questions and connections. It's a reminder that engaging with history isn't just about, memorizing facts and dates. It's about engaging with these ideas that continue to shape us today.
It is, yeah. And this outline, it's definitely given us a lot to ponder and, I don't know, maybe even a few things to act on.
It's amazing, isn't it, how even decades after his death, Gandhi's ideas still resonate so powerfully.
Yeah, like his influence, it goes way beyond India, right?
Absolutely. The outline even connects his promotion of the charkha, that spinning wheel. It
Yeah.
connects it to modern movements like slow fashion and fair trade. It's wild. Like he was anticipating these issues way back then.
Yeah, and it all goes back to his belief in individual action, right? Like
Hmm.
making conscious choices.
Hmm.
He saw the charkha as this way for people to take control of their livelihoods, support their local communities, you know, prioritize sustainability over like just mindless consumption.
Hmm.
And those ideas, they're more relevant now than ever. I mean, think about it, fast fashion, global supply chains.
It's true. Gandhi understood that true change, it has to start with individuals, with us.
And his own life, it's like the ultimate example. I mean, he lived so simply,
Yeah.
very few possessions. His focus was on his inner growth, his spiritual development. It's a radical concept, especially today. But you know what? There's something really appealing about it.
It's about finding fulfillment in things that truly matter, right? Not just material possessions.
Right. So, okay, we've talked about his life, his philosophy, but like, how did he actually do it? How did he bring about such massive change? What were his tactics?
Well, Gandhi was a brilliant strategist, that's for sure. And his methods, they were all rooted in the principles of satyagraha.
Right, satyagraha. So nonviolent resistance. But what did that actually look like in action?
So it was about things like boycotts, marches, peaceful protests, using those to disrupt those unjust systems, force the people in power to really see the consequences of their actions.
So it was active, right? Not just passive resistance.
Exactly. And Gandhi, he was so good at choosing actions that were both symbolic and impactful. Like we were saying before, the salt march, right? Such a simple act, making salt.
Yeah.
But it challenged the entire foundation of British rule in India.
And it worked
Hmm.
because it resonated with everyone, right? It wasn't some abstract political concept. It was
Yeah.
about something everyone could understand, everyone needed salt.
Exactly. It tapped into this shared experience, this basic need.
And Gandhi, he wasn't afraid to put himself out there. I mean, imprisonment, hunger strikes, he went through it all. But that commitment, it's what inspired so many others to join the fight.
It showed the depth of his conviction, you know? He truly believed in what he was fighting for, and that's something we can all learn from.
Yeah. It's easy to talk about change, but are we willing to put ourselves on the line for it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this outline, it covers Gandhi's life, his philosophy, his influence. But I'm kind of curious. There's this part about his views on technology. It's like, what would Gandhi think about our world today? I mean, it's so different from his time.
Right. I mean, he advocated for simplicity, self-reliance, values that seem, almost at odds with our hyper-connected, technology-driven society.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't a big fan of industrialization, mass production. For him, progress wasn't about material wealth, but about, like, spiritual and moral growth.
But he also saw how technology could improve lives, connect people.
Yeah.
He used the printing press to spread his message, even the radio.
So maybe he wouldn't be totally against it as long as it was used for good, right? Ethically.
I think he would urge us to use it mindfully, to be aware of the potential downsides, the potential for harm, the potential for distraction.
It's definitely a lot to think about. Okay, so we've explored his life, his philosophy, his lasting impact. But there's this one last thing in the outline that I can't get past it. It's bugging me. This part about encouraging listeners to learn more.
Well, that's a good thing, right? It means this outline has sparked your curiosity. And it shows that there's always more to learn, more to explore, even with someone as well-known as Gandhi.
Yeah, it's like we've been given a glimpse, and now I want the whole picture. So where would you suggest people go from here? Like, what are some good starting points?
Well, his autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth, that's a must-read.
Yeah.
It's incredibly honest, incredibly insightful.
And it's not just, a history book. It's his personal journey, his struggles, his triumphs. It's like connecting with him as a human being.
Exactly. You can also dive into the history of India's independence movement, learn more about the other people involved, the events that shaped that era.
Right, and there are tons of books, documentaries, articles out there that examine Gandhi's impact on the world, from the civil rights movement to all these social justice movements happening today. His ideas, they're still so relevant, still so powerful.
And the most important thing, I think, is to reflect on how his principles can inform our own actions. It's not about idolizing him. It's about finding ways to live those values, nonviolence, compassion, truth, to integrate them into our daily lives.
It's about asking ourselves, what would Gandhi do? Not literally, but as this guidepost for our own choices. How can we be the change we want to see? What are those small acts of courage, of compassion that we can do today? Those are the questions that his legacy, I think, challenges us to ask.
And it's not about, waiting for some grand opportunity to change the world. It's about those everyday choices.
Right. Like, what can we do right now, today, to kind of, embody those principles?
Well, I think it starts with awareness, right? Educating ourselves about the issues we care about and understanding the systems of injustice, those things that create inequality, and being honest with ourselves about, our own role in all of it.
Yeah, that's tough, but important.
It is. It is. And then it's about those actions. It might be, I don't know, choosing fair trade products or supporting local businesses or simply speaking up when you see injustice happening.
Those things, they might seem small, but
they add up. Gandhi believed in that. That individual action can have this ripple effect. He used to say, be the change you wish to see in the world.
gosh, that quote, I've heard it so many times, but hearing it now after going through all this, it hits differently.
It does, doesn't it? It's a reminder that we're not powerless. We all have the ability to make a difference.
Okay, so we've explored Gandhi's life, his philosophy, his impact on the world, and how his ideas, they still matter today. This outline has been such a great starting point, but I gotta admit, there's one thing that's still kind of bugging me. The outline mentions Gandhi's views on technology, and it makes me wonder, what would he think about our modern world? I mean, it's so different from his time.
It's a fascinating question, and one that a lot of people, I think, are still trying to figure out. I mean, on one hand, Gandhi, he was all about simplicity, self-reliance. And those values, they seem almost at odds with our technology-driven society.
Exactly. He wasn't really a fan of industrialization, mass production. For him, progress was measured by, spiritual growth, not material wealth.
Right. But he also recognized that technology, it could be used to improve lives, to connect people. Think about it. He used the printing press, even the radio.
So maybe he wouldn't be totally against it, as long as it was used for good,
Yeah.
used ethically.
I think he would probably urge us to use technology mindfully, to be critical of it, to be aware of its potential for both good and harm, to not let it control us.
That's a tough one, right?
Mm.
Especially today when it feels like technology is like woven into every aspect of our lives.
It is, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a thought. What is your charka? What's that seemingly small act that you can take on that embodies Gandhi's spirit? Self-reliance, social justice, peaceful resistance. Maybe it's choosing fair trade coffee, volunteering in your community, or simply speaking up when you see injustice. Whatever it is, remember, Gandhi believed that even the smallest actions can have a ripple effect.
He did. Those small acts of courage, of compassion, they can create a more just and compassionate world.
So go out there, explore, and be the change you want to see in the world.